friends, welcome. Today in this class we will talk about the government budget and its various components. So in this class we will learn about the meaning of government budget, types of the government budget and the components of a government budget. So let's first start with what is the meaning of the government budget. Okay. Here the government budget is a government document. Okay, it's a document that presents the government's proposed revenue and the government's proposed expenditure for a particular financial year. So we can say that the government budget anticipates the revenue, that is the government revenue and the government expenditure for a current financial year, that is known as the government budget. Okay, here each and every individual is eager to know about the government. Okay, why they are eager to know about the government? Because the government budget talks about the financial performance of the government over the last year. Okay, then the government budget also talks about the policies and programs that implement in the current financial year. Okay, and again it is important for the individual because they know about how their standard of living affects due to any changes in the policies or the governments, and therefore each and every individual is eager to know about what is new or what the change in the government budget. Okay, let's talk about the types of the government budget. Okay, mainly the government budget is divided into two types. The first one is the balanced budget and the second one is the unbalanced budget. Okay, first one is a balanced budget and the second one is the unbalanced budget. When the revenue is equal to the expenditure, the proposed revenue is equal to the expenditure, then it is known as the balanced budget. And when the revenue is not equal to the expenditure, then it is known as the unbalanced budget. Here the unbalanced budget is also further classified into two categories. The first one over here is the surplus budget. Okay, and the next one is the deficit budget. Okay, it is the classification of the unbalanced budget. Why it is known as a surplus budget? Because in this the proposed revenue is higher than the proposed expenditure. That is called the surplus budget. Okay, whereas in case of the deficit, the proposed revenue is less than the expenditure. Over here, the revenue is less than the expenditure. Therefore, it is known as the deficit budget. Okay, so it is about the types of the government budget. Now, let's talk about the component of government budget. Here, the component of the government budget is a very important topic. Okay, it includes the classification of receipts and the classification of expenditure. Okay, so the component of a government budget is mainly divided into two types. Okay, the first one it includes is the revenue budget and the second one is the capital budget. Okay, so let's first start with the revenue budget. Over here the revenue budget is also further divided into two types, that is the revenue receipts and other one is the revenue expenditure. Okay, here then what is the revenue budget? Revenue budget is the inclusive of the revenue receipt, that is the income that the government gets from the public, okay, and the expenditure made by the government through the revenue they are generating. So that is known as the revenue budget. Now let's first talk about the revenue receipts. Okay, revenue receipts, okay, it's an income generated from the income received by the government from all the taxes and the non-tax incomes. Okay, so that is known as the total receipt of the revenue is known as the revenue receipt. It is generated through the ordinary course of the governance. Okay, here the revenue receipt is also divided into two types, that is the tax revenue and the non-tax revenue. These is the two types of the revenue receipt. The first one is the tax revenue and the second one is the non-tax revenue. Okay, here first talking about the tax revenue. Tax revenue is the income generated by the government through the different taxes. Okay, income through the different taxes and the other duties levied by the government, that is known as the tax revenue. Okay, it is from the ordinary course of the governance. Okay, that is known as the tax revenue. Tax revenue is a major source of revenue from the public. Okay, and each and every citizen by law is bound to pay taxes, and if they do not pay the taxes, then that act is punishable. Okay, therefore the tax revenue is very important. Here the tax revenue is again also classified into two types. Okay, the first one is the direct taxes and the second one is indirect taxes. Okay, so over here the direct taxes are those taxes that is paid by the person on whom it is imposed. Okay, the direct taxes are the paid by the person on whom they are imposed. The taxes are imposed and they are liable to pay that taxes. The direct taxes cannot shift to someone else. Okay, for example, the property tax. Okay, property taxes, the property owned by the particular person, let's say A, then A is liable to pay that tax. Okay, and he cannot shift his part of tax to someone else. Therefore, it is known as the direct tax. Let's say the other example is the income tax. Okay, that is all known as the direct taxes. Now let's talk about the indirect taxes. Indirect taxes imposed on the commodities or the services. It is imposed on the commodities or the services. Okay, and it affects the income of the person. Okay, through the consumption expenditure. Okay, the indirect taxes, for example, example of the indirect taxes are the sales tax, custom duty, excise duty, etc. These all are the example of the indirect taxes. That is the taxes which is not directly imposed on a person. Okay, and this tax can be shifted to someone else. That is known as the indirect taxes. Okay, so this is about the types of the tax revenue. Okay, now let's move on to the non-tax revenue. It is the second type of the revenue receipt, that is the non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue is the receipts or the incomes received by the government, that is apart from the taxable income. Okay, other sources the government received any income, that is known as the non-tax revenue. Okay, the example of the non-tax revenue are the fees. Government provides various services, okay, to the people, and therefore the people are paying fees for that to get their services, that is known as the fees, and the government earns revenue for that. For example, the registration of property, or the registration of the birth or the death certificate, and for that the person is paying any fees, that is known as the fees income. It is the type of non-tax revenue. Okay. The next type of the non-tax revenue is the fines and the penalties. If any individual breaks the rules and regulation, therefore they are liable to pay the fines and the penalties. Okay, this is also a type of the non-tax revenue. For example, if a person breaks the traffic rules and therefore they are paying for that, that is known as the fines and penalties. Okay. The next one is the profits of public sector enterprises. Okay. Here the government also runs some of the public sector enterprises, and the profit generated from that public sector enterprises is known as the non-tax revenue. Okay. For example, in India there is the Indian Railway. Okay, it's the best example of the public sector enterprises, and the profit generated from it is belong to the government, and it is known as the non-tax revenue. Okay. Then the next is the gifts and the grants. The gifts and grants received by the government in case of, let's say, the natural calamities like floods, famines, etc. At that time, any grants or the gifts received by the government from the foreign countries or from the international enterprises like the IMF, World Bank, or from the countries, people, then it is known as the gifts and grants that belongs to the non-tax revenue. Okay. And the other type of the next non-tax revenue is the special assessment duty. Special assessment duty. Government provide some special services to the people, and therefore the people is liable to pay tax on that, liable to pay the money for that, and that is known as the special assessment duty. Okay. This income is belong to the non-tax revenue. Okay. So this is about the revenue receipts. Okay. Now let's talk about the revenue expenditure. Here we have, till now we have talked about the revenue receipt. Now let's talk about the revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure is expenditure made by the government on their routine, normal and usual day-to-day operation of the government department, and the provisions of the provisions of the citizens, provisions for providing any services to the citizen, and therefore the expenditure is made, that is known as the revenue expenditure. Okay. Over here, the revenue expenditure, it also has some of the types. For example, the expenditure made by the government for the consumption of goods and services, that is also known as the revenue expenditure. Okay. Over here, the revenue expenditure is for the day-to-day or the normal operation of the government enterprises. Okay. Here it is for the one of the expenditure, revenue expenditures is the government consumption on goods and services. Then the next one is the expenditure made by the government on the agricultural industry or the other industry. Okay, in the agricultural sector, other industrial sector, or for the health, education, etc. Okay, so this all expenditure is known as the revenue expenditure. Then the expenditure made by the government for the defense sector and the civil administration, that is also known as the revenue expenditure. Okay, expenditure made by the government for paying interest on loans that is taken in the previous year, that is also known as the revenue expenditure. Okay. Then the government also made the provisions for the subsidy, and that is the expenditure on subsidy is also known as the revenue expenditure. Okay. So this is about the revenue expenditure, that is the one of the type of the revenue budget. Over here, the revenue, India's major revenue is from the taxable income, while the non-tax income is very less. Over here, it plays a very important role in the central government's income. In the year 2011-12, the revenue, that is the taxable income, tax revenue collected by the central government, the gross revenue is of rupees 9,32,450 crore. Okay, so the tax revenue is very high, while in the same year the non-tax revenue belong to the central government. It is rupees 2,76,572 crore. Therefore, we can say that the tax revenue plays a very important role in the collection of the receipts. Okay, so this is about the revenue budget. Now let's talk about the capital budget. It is the second component of the government budget. Capital budget is inclusive of the capital receipts and the capital expenditure. Okay, capital budget includes the capital receipts and the capital expenditure. Okay, over here let's first talk about the capital receipt. Okay, capital receipt creates a liability. It creates a liability or a reduction in asset. Okay, that is known as the capital receipt. When any budget that there is any receipt that creates a liability or reduction in asset is known as the capital receipt. Okay, the capital receipts are the borrowings of the government from the various ways, like borrowing through the bonds or the securities, etc. Okay, so that is all known as the capital receipt. Over here, the capital receipt taken by the government is of also various types. It includes the loan taken by the government from the public through the sales of the bonds and the security, that is known as the capital receipt. Then the loan taken by the government from RBI and the other international financial institution like the IMF, World Bank, etc. Okay, through the sales of the treasury bills, etc. That is also known as the capital receipt. Okay. Then the other one is the aids from the foreign countries. It is also known as the capital receipts. Okay, and receipts getting from the small saving schemes, for example the PF, etc. Okay, that is also inclusive in the capital receipt. Okay, now let's talk about the capital budget, capital expenditure. Capital expenditure is one of the type of the capital budget. Over here, the expenditure made by the government, that is for the purpose of creating assets in the long run, for the long run, is known as capital expenditure. Okay, it is the creating assets, and for that whatever the expenses incurred by the government is known as the capital expenditure. For example, the expenditure on the purchase of lands, machines, equipments, okay, that is all known as the capital expenditure, or the investment made by the government for getting the high future benefit is also known as the capital expenditure. And therefore, this all helps to create the future benefits for the government. That is known as the capital expenditure. Okay. So till now we have talked about the components of the government budget. Let's have a summary of it. Over here we have mainly the two components of the government budget. Okay, that is the revenue budget and the capital budget. Revenue budget is classified again into two types, that is the revenue receipt and the revenue expenditure. Revenue receipt classified in again two types, that is tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Tax revenue having the direct taxes and indirect taxes income. Okay. Non-tax revenue includes the fees, fines and penalties, profits of the public enterprises, special assessment duties, etc., gifts and grants, etc. Okay. Then the second component of a government budget is the capital budget. Okay. It includes the capital receipts and the capital expenditure. Okay. So this is about the component of the government budget, and in the whole we have talked about the meaning and the concept of the government budget, its types and its meaning, then the classification of receipts, that is revenue receipts and capital receipt, and the classification of the expenditure, that is revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure. Okay, so this is all about today's lecture. I hope you all got it very well. In the next class we will talk about the measures of the government deficit. So stay tuned.